In November, the rail company had a surge in travelers, making it their highest month for Central Florida service. Our traffic expert, Megan Mackey, is breaking down the numbers and spoke to students who ride the train to visit family in South Florida.
Now, a new rail line linking Miami to Orlando is giving Florida its first taste for the potential of high-speed rail.
Brightline's opening of an Orlando station last September looked to be a game changer.
We delve into insightful discussions on various topics shaping our world today. We will explore the complex dynamics of private passenger rail development in America, uncovering the complexities and opportunities within this transformative industry. Stay tuned for engaging insights and thought-provoking analyses on Brightline and the evolving landscape of rail transportation. If there's any place in America where high-speed rail could thrive, it's right here. Below this line resides a population of nearly 20 million people, 6.5 million in the Miami metropolitan area, 3 million in Tampa, and another 2.5 million in Orlando. This sizable population is relatively concentrated compared to other American regions, making it feasible to establish a few key stations. Moreover, with each of these three metro areas located within approximately 200 miles or 320 kilometers from each other, they're close enough that air travel becomes cumbersome, yet far enough that enduring hours of traffic on the interstate is a hassle. Additionally, there are numerous reasons for travel between these areas: the allure of the East Coast beaches, the commercial opportunities around Tampa Bay, the vibrant culture of Miami, and the entertainment offerings of Orlando attract tourists, travelers within the state, and business professionals alike. Furthermore, from a geographical standpoint, there are no significant obstacles in the path of rail development, no mountain ranges, no vast canyons, no physical barriers that would necessitate extraordinary engineering feats. This idea of connecting Tampa to Orlando to Miami via a train route that reduces travel time from a day to mere hours is not a novel concept. Since the 1980s, both Floridians and federal planners have been examining maps, crunching numbers, and advocating for the realization of such a transportation network. However, no public-private partnership succeeded in the 1980s, 1990s, 2000s, or even the 2010s. Following the rejection of the most recent public-private partnership by Governor Rick Scott in 2011, another high-speed rail proposal emerged, presenting both excitement and uncertainty. This initiative, known as All Aboard Florida, was launched in 2012 with the ambitious goal of establishing a billion-dollar service from South Florida to Orlando by 2014. Similar to its predecessors, All Aboard Florida exceeded its initial cost estimate and missed its projected opening date. However, unlike previous attempts, All Aboard Florida, later rebranded as Brightline, successfully commenced operations in 2018 as a fast and entirely private rail service, marking a first in the United States. Although the initial service was limited, offering deeply discounted tickets on January 13, 2018, travelers were only able to cover the 40-minute journey from Fort Lauderdale to West Palm Beach, falling short of the envisioned 230 miles of track connecting major metro areas in Central and South Florida. While the service later expanded to include the 66-mile stretch between West Palm Beach and Miami, Brightline did not yet fulfill the criteria for high-speed rail, operating at a maximum speed of 79 miles per hour, rather than the desired 25 miles per hour. However, despite only covering a 70-mile stretch at speeds considered pedestrian by global standards, the commencement of Brightline's service to actual customers in 2018 was a rare occurrence in the United States, a new passenger rail project transitioning into a tangible reality. High-speed or even higher-speed rail projects entail significant long-term investments, and Brightline is no exception. One notable advantage Brightline had was its parent company, Florida East Coast Industries, which happened to own the Florida East Coast Railway. Unlike other contenders who would have to negotiate and lease a rail corridor, Brightline already had access to the very railway that played a pivotal role in developing South Florida a century earlier. However, gaining access to a rail corridor was just the initial hurdle. To operate frequent and fast services, Brightline needed to construct an entirely new set of rails along more than 2/3 of the 66-mile corridor. While seemingly straightforward, double tracking is a time-consuming and costly endeavor. Complicating matters further were the rivers and canals that the railway had to traverse. Although each was already crossed by a bridge, nearly all were designed for a single set of rails, necessitating the replacement of most bridges to accommodate 2 sets. Additionally, in sections where existing rails could be reused, there were alignment issues to address. To accommodate passenger trains traveling at double the speed of the freight trains the rails were originally designed for, crews had to manually adjust the rails to create more gradual turns and straighter alignments. These rail modifications alone, not to mention the necessary signaling upgrades and alterations to sidings, consumed 3 years of work for the company along this specific section of rail. As Brightline prepared its railway infrastructure, it also needed to establish stations. It started by constructing 3 stations from scratch, engaging in negotiations and agreements with each municipality and their local mass transit systems to integrate its intercity rails with other transportation options. Each station was designed with a modern appearance and offered services beyond just serving as a stop. The highlight was the Miami Central Station, which covered approximately 9 acres or 4 city blocks and featured elevated platforms, restaurants, shops, around 300 parking spaces, and 2 38-story towers containing 800 apartments, simply creating a functional route to offer a trip from Miami to West Palm Beach in about an hour and 15 minutes, priced between $25 to $50 one way, required Brightline to navigate 6 years of challenges, including municipal and federal environmental impact assessments, rail alignment adjustments, and multi-million-dollar construction projects. This was only Phase 1. Undeterred by delays or costs in the initial phase, Brightline proceeded with constructing a new station linked to the Orlando International Airport. In the fall of 2023, the Miami to Orlando service commenced for the public. Brightline's momentum continues, with Phase 3, connecting Orlando to Tampa, already underway. However, Brightline's most significant obstacle wasn't related to design, planning, or construction. Being an American passenger rail project, it required substantial political support to succeed. This support was challenging to obtain given the current climate for passenger railways in the United States. Nonetheless, Brightline pursued a novel approach. Publicly, Brightline presented itself as a fully private, capitalist entity developing a service driven by the free market without posing any risk to taxpayers. However, behind the scenes, it collaborated closely with state and federal governments to accomplish what politicians had struggled to achieve. Deep within the Internal Revenue Service's tax code, specifically within the 500S of its approximately 4,000 pages, lies a series of sections outlining strict parameters for a financial mechanism known as private activity bonds, PABs. Particularly on page 555, Part A of Section 142 opens up the eligibility of high-speed intercity rail projects to issue PABs. PABs operate on a simple premise. Companies issue bonds to raise funds for large-scale projects with long-term profit potential, necessitating substantial initial investments. They repay the bond buyer in installments, along with interest, resulting in the company paying back more than the initial bond purchase price over time. However, the bond buyer is typically subject to taxes on the interest income generated by the bond, unless they invest in government bonds. Governments often issue tax-exempt bonds that still yield interest but are exempt from taxes, allowing them to offer lower than average interest rates, saving money while still attracting sufficient bond buyers since the tax exemption offsets the reduced interest income. This arrangement is feasible because governments have the authority to set tax policy. PABs, however, represent a unique scenario where non-governmental bonds qualify for tax-exempt status, but only with government approval. The government may authorize the issuance of a predetermined value of PABs if they deem that a private company is undertaking a project in the public interest that warrants incentivization, such as passenger rail development. After an expansion of eligibility and issuances in 2005, the private sector seized the opportunity presented by PABs. For instance, Centerpoint raised approximately $225 million through PABs to construct the largest inland port in the country near Chicago. This port served as a crucial connection point between America's truck and rail freight networks. While building, operating, and selling intermodal logistics, hubs like this was Centerpoint's primary focus. Utilizing PABs offered a discount on financing. Despite foregoing tens of millions of dollars in tax revenue, the federal government deemed it worthwhile to strengthen America's freight transportation network, recognizing that improved freight logistics would likely increase the national tax base overall, even if it proved profitable for a private enterprise. However, this project represents one of the most clearly private ventures funded by PABs. Others blur the lines. The greater Louisville, Kentucky area has long grappled with chronic traffic congestion, particularly due to its location along the Ohio River, leading to significant backups for travelers crossing to the Indiana side and vice versa. In response, the two states and the federal government concluded that building a bridge to the north to divert through traffic away from the city was necessary, connecting two isolated sections of interstate. Although the government planned and designed the project, when it came time for construction and operation of the costly bridge, the entire endeavor was essentially delegated to a consortium formed by Vinci and BBGI, two major multinational infrastructure investment firms. With the federal government's approval, this consortium issued $677 million in private activity bonds to finance the bridge's construction. Now operational, they are repaying these bonds using toll revenue collected under a long-term operating agreement set to last until 2051. However, from the perspective of the general public, this arrangement isn't particularly groundbreaking. The bridge appears and functions like any other toll bridge across America. Yet, the private sector's infiltration into American infrastructure becomes even more subtle. 2 hours northwest, a portion of a state highway was due for an upgrade to meet federal interstate standards and become part of the new I-69 corridor linking Mexico to Canada. However, instead of the state handling the project entirely, it hired a private company not just to construct the road, but also to manage its operations. The company issued $244 million in PABs to fund the construction. Interestingly, there are no tolls associated with this section of interstate from the public standpoint. It operates as a toll-free section like any other. However, behind the scenes, Indiana is paying tens of millions annually in availability payments to the company for its services, enabling it to repay its bonds. Brightline isn't much different from these infrastructure projects. It's technically a private endeavor, but one that heavily relied on public sector support to materialize. In addition to obtaining numerous project approvals, Brightline financed its construction through $3 billion in tax-exempt private activity bonds. In essence, the use of private activity bonds, PABs, for infrastructure projects falls somewhere between a direct grant and a fully private endeavor. While the government must approve PAB issuances, the foregone tax revenue carries a similar cost as an equivalent grant. Therefore, projects like Louisville's new toll bridge lean slightly towards the public side, while projects like Brightline lean slightly towards the private side, both straddling the center of the public-private spectrum. They finance construction using tax-advantage bonds and recoup costs through user fees. While there are semantic distinctions based on project initiation or infrastructure ownership, the crucial difference lies in perception rather than strict categorization as public or private. Recent history has shown a lack of effective political will in America for passenger rail development. Despite constant discussion, little meaningful progress has been made in nearly a century. The prevailing, albeit largely incorrect, argument against such development is the perceived lack of demand for widespread passenger rail due to lower population density and high car ownership rates. Critics argue that any passenger rail service would operate at a loss, necessitating taxpayer funding. Amidst decades of political deadlock against public rail projects in Florida, Brightline emerged, asserting that they could achieve the same goals without risking taxpayer funds. While this claim holds some truth, as private activity bonds minimize taxpayer risk, they do not eliminate it. The government only loses tax revenue if Brightline succeeds. In an alternative scenario where the project is financed solely by traditional private sector bonds, the government would also forego tax revenue in the event of failure, as investors would not receive repayment, resulting in no taxable income. Thus, at first glance, private activity bonds, PABs, seem like a clever form of grant that only imposes costs when a project succeeds, with minimal downside risk, or so the argument goes. However, the reality is more nuanced. Institutional investors investing in Brightline bonds have finite resources, so PABs divert funds away from traditional bonds and investments, leading to reduced tax revenue from fewer investments in taxable assets. Moreover, when PAB-funded projects encounter difficulties, they do not always unfold as the risk-free scenarios promised by politicians and project leaders. For example, the section of I-69 in Indiana faced significant challenges. Mismanagement resulted in substantial cost overruns, making it evident that the concessionaire would struggle to repay bondholders. This situation posed a problem for the state of Indiana because the varying interest rates offered by different bond issuers serve as market-driven indicators of risk. Bonds issued by financially reputable entities, such as the United States government, typically carry low interest rates. Conversely, bonds issued by less credible entities, like fledgling tech startups, must offer higher interest rates to attract investors due to heightened perceived risk of default. In Indiana's case, if the private company failed to repay its loans, it could potentially raise the cost of financing for public-private partnerships statewide. This would signal to investors that the state may struggle in selecting reliable project partners, thereby increasing the perceived risk associated with all public-private partnerships in the state. Consequently, the state intervened, assuming control of the project and repaying the bondholders in full, despite not being legally obligated to do so. The decision was driven by long-term financial considerations rather than legal responsibility. Despite the complexity surrounding private activity bonds and public-private infrastructure projects in general, what ultimately matters most for the successful development of American passenger rail is public perception. The promise of a project that, at worst, would create jobs and inject funds into the state before potentially faltering, or at best, would establish a transportation system envied by the entire nation, all without risk to the taxpayer, resonated strongly. Even if this message isn't entirely accurate, its overall truth is sufficient to overshadow any nuances. Increasingly, it seems that the Brightline model of American rail development is replicable. Texas Central Railway presents a similar, albeit grander, proposition. It aims to construct a genuine high-speed line between Dallas and Houston utilizing Japanese Shinkansen technology, offering 90-minute journeys between two sizable, affluent cities currently separated by a 4-hour drive. Over its decade of existence, Texas Central Railway has made significant strides, raising hundreds of millions in capital, acquiring substantial land along the route, and overcoming numerous political, legal, and permitting obstacles. Although in its early years, Texas Central Railway adamantly insisted on 100% private funding, recent messaging has softened, hinting at the possibility of quiet public funding through mechanisms such as PABs. In 2022, the company seemed to collapse when its CEO and key executives unexpectedly departed without explanation, leading many to assume the ambitious venture was permanently shelved. However, in 2023, signs of revival emerged when Amtrak, the government-owned rail operator, released a cryptic press release announcing a partnership with Texas Central to continue early-stage development. This partnership has progressed, with the duo receiving a modest $500,000 federal grant to further their work. While still ambitious and far from certain, this development subtly indicates that some in Washington recognize the value of private sector involvement in American passenger rail projects, regardless of their public nature in practice. Moving westward, Brightline, or an affiliated company sharing ownership and branding, is replicating its business model in a new region, the route between Los Angeles and Las Vegas. Similar to their Florida venture, this corridor presents a lucrative travel route supported by tourism and offers relatively low construction costs thanks to the sparse and flat desert terrain between the two cities. In this more progressive region, the company has garnered deeper public support. In addition to billions of dollars in PAB financing, Brightline West has secured billions more in state and federal grants, possibly driven by the impending 2028 Olympics in Los Angeles and the company's ambitious commitment to completing the project by then. Consequently, Brightline West has become the second private passenger rail project in America in the 21st century to transition from improbable to probable, to the extent that the Biden administration is already claiming credit for its role in the endeavor. However, the reason why Brightline's audacious claims of constructing a passenger rail service in 4 years, or even establishing its Florida service initially, were believable is because they focus on the most accessible opportunities. They target areas with an ideal 3 or 4 hour travel time between affluent tourist-oriented destinations, resulting in high demand. Coupled with favorable geography, such as existing rail alignments or sparsely populated landscapes, this leads to lower construction costs. Essentially, Brightline is deploying passenger trains where they have the highest likelihood of profitability, a strategy that aligns with prudent business practices. The challenge lies in the fact that this approach is what Amtrak should be pursuing. Effective passenger rail isn't simply a business venture, it's a vital public service. Similarly, roads are also considered public services, meaning they aren't constructed solely based on profit potential. If every road in America operated on a user fee model, where users paid based on their usage, many busy roads would indeed generate profits. However, numerous roads would fail to cover their costs. In reality, America's road system operates on a taxpayer-funded model, where revenue from taxes is pooled to finance construction and maintenance. Yet, similar discrepancies exist. While some roads directly justify their costs, many others do not. For instance, a rural road connecting distant ranches to urban centers may never generate enough revenue to sustain itself under a fee-based model. However, the public accepts this loss because the connectivity provided is deemed valuable for facilitating the transportation of goods from ranches to processors, ultimately benefiting everyone by reducing food costs. Effectively, taxpayers who primarily use busy urban highways end up subsidizing less profitable rural roads. This subsidy is generally accepted because connectivity is seen as beneficial for society as a whole. Passenger rail systems should operate under a similar principle because the same fundamental principles apply. Globally, effective rail systems utilize profits from high-traffic, cost-effective corridors to offset losses from low-traffic, more expensive ones. This nationwide connectivity enhances social and economic mobility, contributing to national economic growth. Ideally, Amtrak or another national rail operator would leverage profits from popular routes like Miami to Orlando or Los Angeles to Las Vegas to support less profitable routes like Idaho Falls to Salt Lake City. However, with each corridor developed by the private sector, the potential for this ideal scenario diminishes. Nevertheless, Amtrak and the government, which have historically impeded its progress, have had ample time to establish meaningful service on these routes without success. Therefore, the argument that we should postpone the good in pursuit of the perfect is no longer tenable. Hopefully, the success of Brightline will shift public opinion and reduce resistance against national public sector rail development. Early indicators suggest that Brightline is indeed a success story. Within the first 70 days of operation, 190,000 passengers traveled on the company's new Miami to Orlando service, and monthly averages continue to rise as train frequency increases to 16 trains in each direction daily. Furthermore, the West Palm Beach to Miami segment achieved operational profitability after just a few years of operation, with signs pointing to similar success for the long-distance segment to Orlando shortly. This positive momentum has garnered significantly more public support for the company's western expansion compared to its initial service. While this may mark the beginning of an American passenger rail revival, it's just the tip of the iceberg. The country still has a long way to go to catch up with other wealthy nations, and numerous factors must align for private sector projects to translate into widespread public benefits. Nevertheless, it's a promising start, one that could potentially be viewed in hindsight as the catalyst for a passenger rail renaissance. This new era of private passenger rail development underscores the significant impact of refining the underlying business model. While both Amtrak and Brightline operate trains, Brightline's business model has enabled it to operate more efficiently, rapidly expand its services, and cover more geographical areas. Thank you for joining us for exploring infrastructure, transportation, and business innovations.